It is stated that all dark wizards come from Slytherin house, but nothing could be further from the truth. Hufflepuff is confirmed to have produced no dark wizards whatsoever. But as for the other Hogwarts houses, you may just find some skeletons in their closets. Here are 5 dark wizards that were not in Slytherin. Number 5. Young Albus Dumbledore. The young Albus Dumbledore was far from the professor we know and love. While he did end up reforming after realizing how power-hungry he was becoming, in his youth Albus Dumbledore held ideology that was very much in line with many dark wizards. He believed that wizards should rule over muggles. To make this a reality, he sought domination over muggles and to establish a wizarding ruling class, presumably with himself and Grindelwald as the rulers. It is clear that Dumbledore definitely had a bad ideological point of view, and whilst he justified his worldview, it was bad nonetheless. After all, justifiable evil is still evil at the end of the day. He didn't seem to enjoy the thought of killing, and he didn't reach Grindelwald in heights of deeds actually done before he changed his mind. His ideology at the time was nearly identical to Grindelwald's. Dumbledore believed that what he was doing was right, but many of the wizards considered dark that we see earnestly believed they were right. Grindelwald may have thought everything he did was for the greater good, but he's still remembered by history as a very dark wizard, so at least for a time, Dumbledore could be considered a dark wizard from Gryffindor. Number 4. Gilderoy Lockhart. Initially, whilst reading the Harry Potter series, Gilderoy Lockhart is seemingly a good guy. Sure, he is quite annoying from the very beginning. We're clearly aware of his smugness and ego, and how could we not when he continually reminds us that he was 5-time winner of Witch Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award. Our perception of Lockhart quickly changes when it is revealed that Lockhart had been stealing all the glory from other prominent wizards. Unknown to many, Dumbledore actually wanted Lockhart teaching as defense against the dark arts teacher because he knew Lockhart was a fraud and that Hogwarts would eventually expose it. Lockhart's true character was revealed at the end of the Chamber of Secrets, when it became apparent that he was going to flee the school when given the task to retrieve Ginny Weasley from the Chamber of Secrets. Lockhart clearly wanted all the fame and glory for himself, and was not above dark means to achieve this goal, even if it meant wiping the memories of other witches and wizards to take credit for himself. Whilst Lockhart was not the traditional idea of evil in the Harry Potter series, he proved time and time again that he was willing to do anything to ensure that his own interests were the #1 priority. The famous Gilderoy Lockhart was, of course, a Ravenclaw. Number 3. Quirinus Quirrell. Quirrell, feeling inadequate and wishing to prove himself, developed an initially theoretical interest in the dark arts. Quirrell had a latent desire to make the world sit up and notice him. When Quirrell travelled the world, he set out to find whatever remained of Voldemort, partly out of curiosity, partly out of that unacknowledged desire for importance. Quirrell fantasized that he could be the one that found Voldemort, and would thus ensure he was never laughed at again. The Hogwarts teacher was both naive and arrogant in thinking that he would be able to control an encounter with Voldemort, even in the Dark Wizard's weakened state. When Voldemort realized the young man had a position at Hogwarts, he immediately took possession of Quirrell, who was incapable of resisting. While Quirrell did not lose his soul, Quirrell spent the last year of his life attempting to procure the Philosopher's Stone for Voldemort, who used his nervous disposition to his advantage, as his perceived lack of confidence had earned very little respect from the students at Hogwarts and consequently diverted suspicion away from his plans. Quirrell was a foolish young man who was full of naive ideas about the concept of good and evil, which Voldemort ultimately took advantage of. Whilst he may have been controlled and manipulated by Voldemort, Quirrell inherently became a dark wizard that would do anything to obtain the power he sought after to be taken seriously for the first time in his life. Number 2. Peter Pettigrew. Peter Pettigrew is perhaps the only Gryffindor Death Eater that we know about. There are sure to have been others, but none that have been confirmed. You could argue that Pettigrew liked the idea of being evil and one of the Dark Lord's inner circle, but at the heart of it he wasn't acting out of much more than fear and desire to, for once, be feared, and his list of crimes would, in his mind, actually achieve that. The only problem, of course, was that he wasn't feared. He was ridiculed and treated with disgust in equal measure. Voldemort even uses his childhood nickname of Wormtail in a derogatory fashion, that he is in effect the lowest of his lackeys rather than a trusted aide. Like Lockhart, Pettigrew only did what was in his best interests, and in his case that meant becoming a Death Eater and cowering before Voldemort. Whilst Pettigrew did like the idea of joining the dark side, he also did what he did out of fear and self-preservation. He committed some of the worst crimes out of all of Voldemort's Death Eaters. He killed 12 innocent muggles with one curse, betrayed his best friends to Voldemort, let Sirius Black rot in Azkaban prison for 12 years for crimes he did not commit, killed Bertha Jorkins and Cedric Diggory. The pinnacle of all of these was responsible for Voldemort's rebirth and his return to power, which ultimately led to even more death. Number 1. Barty Crouch Jr.
Hello, Father.
Perhaps one of the most surprising members of Ravenclaw is none other than Barty Crouch Jr. The supremely intelligent wizard received 12 owls during his time at Hogwarts and was a skilled potioneer. Crouch Jr. was completely dedicated and loyal to Voldemort. He endured Azkaban, and then he endured a life staying under the Imperius Curse. Even after all those years, he was still angry when someone showed disloyalty or disrespect to the Dark Lord. Barty Crouch Jr. is, with little doubt, the most dangerous, level-headed, and competent of all Death Eaters, to the point of being the favourite of the notoriously hard-to-please Lord Voldemort. Crouch Jr. freely admits that he lives and breathes to serve Voldemort. In an extremely twisted search for a father's approval, he sees similarities between himself and Voldemort in their relation to their fathers. His issues with his father would have fueled his anger towards him, and pushed him more to the service of the Dark Lord than ever before. But killing one's own father on a single order without any apparent remorse shows an inherent evilness to an extent as well.